I'll start with just saying thank you to the organisers for inviting me to speak today. We had a really productive round table in London a few months ago, and I think we realised that we share a lot of the same challenges and opportunities, and there's an opportunity now to share what we've been doing, and I certainly found this conference very helpful in gaining a better understanding of your market and your challenges. Bit of an introduction. My name's Yselkla. I manage our emerging market sector in BEAMA. BEAMA is a trade body in the UK. We represent manufacturers of equipment from the transmission distribution side right down to building services, including smart meters, in-home displays, heat pumps. There's an awful lot of products that we cover. We have over 200 members. A lot of them are multinational companies, some of which have very well-established markets in India as well. And we also have a lot of smaller companies that maybe just have a focus in the UK on specific smart grid and smart metering related products. What I'm doing here this week, I've had lots of meetings with a lot of the energy companies here. Like I said, I'm trying to gain a better understanding of the market challenges here and how they relate to what we're doing in the UK. And I think working with UK trade and investment, we want to bring more of the smaller companies over to India and introduce them to the market. So who do we work with? We work with UK government, the European Commission. We are members of an equivalent kind of smart grid forum in the UK run by the Department of Energy and Climate Change and our regulator, Ofgem. We work very closely with our regulator, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. We work with UK trade and investment, standard institutions within the UK, Europe, and internationally. And we work with other trade bodies and research institutions. We publish a lot of technical guidance on various product areas for all those groups of people. So I was asked to talk about smart energy in smart cities in the context of the UK. And I think smart grids and smart cities means different things to different people. So I thought I would just start with what I think is a smart city. And I think to break it down, I'm going to talk about a smart city in the context of how it harnesses the power of network devices, both centrally controlled and controlled by the consumer. And there's a really important role for big data to improve the functioning and capability of cities. And this can help tackle all sorts of environmental challenges, energy security, the efficiency of increasingly pressured urban environments, transport, waste management. And I'm going to just focus on the energy element. Of course, we're talking about harnessing network devices across all of those sectors within a city. I also had a look at some recent work done in the UK about what the market size globally is for smart cities. And I found that smart energy technology market, including smart grids, potentially by 2020 could be worth around $220 billion. I mean, these figures range quite drastically, but I think this gives us an idea of what the market opportunity is here. And smart transport, $156 billion. Smart waste and assisted living technologies, $5 billion by 2020. So I think it's good that I'm getting to speak about energy because I think it's a good starting point for a smart city, and it's certainly a key driver for smart cities. And this is where we're seeing considerable change in the UK, mostly driven by our carbon reduction targets and, of course, what we've been hearing earlier, the growth in distributed generation and overall demand. We are already experiencing problems from domestic PV installations in the UK. And heat pumps, electric vehicles. There are a number of steps we're doing I think we've already started taking in the UK to develop our smart grid infrastructure. These include the smart meter rollout, which is a government-led programme. We have a new regulatory framework, which is put in place to incentivise our distribution network operators to install new technologies. We're funding innovation, and I'll talk a bit more about that as well. And of course, government are reforming a lot of policies to provide the right market incentives for companies to invest in the market and create the business case for smart grids. And of course, we have European drivers that the Commission set for us. So I'm going to talk about these 4 points as quickly as I can. GB smart meter rollout. I had a workshop in Bangalore on Tuesday where I met some of you there. And I think we had quite an interesting discussion around some of the drivers for smart metering in the UK and in India. They're slightly different. Ours is a very consumer-led rollout. But we have a mandate from the Commission, so a lot of member states are rolling out smart meters to domestic and small commercial customers. By 2020 in the UK, we will have rolled out 53 million electricity and gas smart meters. This is a supplier-led rollout, so they have a license condition to complete rolling out smart meters to every dwelling by December the 1st, 2020. So that's a legal obligation. As I said, this is very much customer-driven, so the customer's absolutely at the focus of the design of this infrastructure. And importantly, we've therefore decided that the buyers will also be mandated to provide a free in-home display with the meter so that customers can see their energy use in real time and become more engaged with their energy management. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. The regulatory, commercial and technical platforms for all of this is now largely complete. And the main rollout will start in 2016 once a central data communications company is operating. So this is an entirely new company that's been set up by UK government to manage the data from smart meters to the suppliers and distribution network operators. And in terms of the net present value of this programme, it's over £6 billion. So, the objectives, very customer focused, to provide a better, more accurate information on energy use and cost to help consumers save energy and, of course, carbon. And it's there to drive cost savings and efficiencies across the whole energy system. So consumers will own their data and they can give permission for other companies, suppliers, distribution companies or aggregators to access that data and in the future participate in a demand-side market. And it's there to support and enhance energy market competition. So with real-time billing and real-time information coming through on the meter, it will be possible for a customer to change suppliers almost at a flick of a switch, whereas now it can take up to a month to change, and it's quite a laborious process. They'll be able to find the best rate with a different supplier and switch suppliers more easily. And overall, this is there to incentivize smart grids, and there's quite a lot written into the specification for smart meters that will enable more demand-side market options for domestic customers and commercial customers in the future. So what extra elements have we put into the smart metering programme to develop a smart grid market in the UK? We see the rollout of smart meters as a very critical part of this whole smart grid platform because it gives us that real-time data that's necessary to get visibility of the energy system and demand at that low level with domestic customers. So we're providing a platform in two ways. The metering and associated equipment installed in premises provides the required functionality through the in-home display and what's called a consumer access device. So this is a device that is permitted to connect to the smart metering home area network as a gateway for data, basically. So it just enables the customer to extract data from their meter, and this can be used in whatever way they want to. So it can just be stored, or a consumer access device in the future could potentially sit in your washing machine or your heat pump control, and therefore your appliance is able to receive real-time tariff data and respond and hopefully operate in the most cost-effective way possible. And the communication services that we provide are are scalable. I think the Department of Energy and Climate Change have worked very well with industry to make sure that we can adapt and grow this infrastructure to make these demand-side markets develop. Bit more technical information, the smart meter will provide a wireless home area network in the consumer's home using Zigbee wireless, and the meter will use this to exchange data between the consumer, and that's how the consumer will pair devices through using a consumer access device. I'm trying to summarize something that's quite technical and there's a lot of information. So if you do want more information, I have lots of packs outside with a paper published by the Department of Energy and Climate Change which outlines the structure of this program in a lot more detail. So enough on smart metering. I'll be as quick as I can. So in terms of smart grids and what our distribution companies are doing in the UK, we have 6 distribution companies across the UK, and they're very closely regulated by Ofgem. Previously, every 5 years, a DNO, distribution network operator, is asked to write a business plan, which Ofgem closely scrutinise and approve. And this is based on a regulatory framework. And they've now introduced a new regulatory framework called RIIO. That stands for Revenue, which equals to Incentives, Innovation, and Outputs. So what does that mean? Well, effectively, this has been developed to hopefully give the distribution companies the power to invest in new technologies, and it will set the price control for the next 8 years. So they're planning now over a much longer period of time, which is supposed to enable them to think more carefully about kind of long-term planning, which should hopefully incentivize some of these smart grid options. As a regulator, Ofgem must ensure that this is the investment in smart grids is delivered at a fair price to consumers. And to help achieve this, they developed RIIO. And it's a performance-based model for setting the network company's price controls, which will last 8 years. It's designed to encourage network companies to put stakeholders at the heart of their decision-making process, invest more efficiently to ensure energy security, innovate, and play a full role in delivering low-carbon economy. Quite an important part of RIIO is the introduction of a new innovation, what we call an innovation stimulus. It's a funding mechanism. So one's called the Network Innovation Competition, so up to £90 million per year will be spent on more trials and pilots. And there's a Network Innovation Allowance, which is an allowance within their revenue of 0.5%. It can go, some are going above that, up to 1%, to invest again in testing and piloting new technologies. So the last price control also had an innovation fund called the Low Carbon Network Fund, which Reggie mentioned. This was £500 million spent by the distribution network operators in the last 5 years to sponsor projects with multiple partners on each project, including the suppliers, a lot of the manufacturers in the UK, and other service providers. There's a wealth of information on all of these projects. There are an awful lot of them, and there is a website specially set up by the Networks Association in the UK to host all the learning from these projects. One of the requirements under the fund that Ofgem set was that all the learning has to be completely transparent, so they have to publish everything. And this includes all the results from how customers engaged with new time of use tariffs, and how effective new automation equipment was on the network. There's a real range of projects. One in particular, which is a bit more smart cities focused, is called the Low Carbon London project, led by UK Power Networks in the UK. And this did a number of things, and I thought this might be something worth flagging up. They monitored low carbon technologies, power quality, and network impact at a large scale across London. They implemented, not implanted smart meters. They implemented smart meters, I think about 1,200 of them within London, to understand the value of network information to customers. So they did a lot of surveys with customers to understand how they engaged with that data, how useful it was to them. And the outputs from that are showing that the majority of customers were very engaged and really were very pleased with this new way of managing their energy use. And with this, they conducted demand-side response and signed new commercial arrangements with industrial and commercial customers as well. They tested demand flexibility for network constraint management and supply following, or what's called wind twinning, by implementing a residential dynamic time of use tariff. So that's a 3-tiered price for domestic customers that was sent to their smart meter, and they had some smart appliances linked with a consumer access device that were responding to this. I think 95% of the customers signed on to that demand response contract wanted to continue, and were quite annoyed that it was a trial and not something for the long term. And I think about 87% saved on their energy bill, so it was effective. But they've done a lot of analysing of the opportunities, and they've developed new tools and outlined planning, operational investment practices that they will now roll out into their new planning during Rio. One of the obligations under Rio is that all the learning from these projects they have to show how they're bringing that into their business planning. It can't just be a trial that produces a lot of nice, interesting information and then they don't do anything with it. I did want to quickly say something about standards and importantly, the tools we need to develop a smart grid. We had a European mandate to develop smart grid standards, and this has produced a very useful tool called the Smart Grid Architecture Model. And I think the basis for this is that the electricity grid has been operating under fairly stable set of requirements for many years, and now these are changing. And this creates a lot of challenges for the stakeholders currently rooted in the market, because there are existing silos in the UK with transmission, distribution, and the supplier market. So how do you overcome the complexity of this when you have new communication infrastructure being overlaid on existing networks? And how do you manage all the data that's coming from this? So the Smart Grid Architecture Model has been introduced as a tool to enable a common understanding. So you can do better system engineering and analyse how the different components of your smart grid are overlain on each other. Some member states have mandated that this will be used as a procurement tool by the distribution companies, because it's the only way that we can effectively communicate the complexity of these new system dynamics. But I just thought I'd flag that up, because in the UK we're doing a lot of work to figure out how we can not just use this for just buying a smart grid, but use this to innovate as well, to actually look at testing different designs and use cases for smart grids. There's also been a lot of work done by the British Standards Institute on developing standards for smart cities. The UK Department of Business, Innovation and Skills has commissioned them to do this, and there's a list of the standards that have been developed. Again, with the mandate from Europe on smart grids, these aren't standards that say this is what you're going to install, this is exactly the specification you're going to use. These are tools and frameworks so that everyone's planning their smart city and their smart grid on the same basis. They're using the same definitions. Everyone can understand what they're doing, but around that they can innovate with new technologies. In conclusion, so I think there's a lot of learning coming out from these projects we've been doing in the UK. It's very helpful to discuss, we've had a lot of discussions during this conference about some of this, and I strongly recommend you visit the Smarter Networks website, which hosts a lot of this. For us, smart metering is a key enabling technology for smart energy in smart city environments, because that will give us the aggregated data we need, and also, importantly, give the customer access to their data and empower them to use it in a way to manage their energy use. And I think the key to the success of the smart meter rollout will be ensuring it is customer-led, and there's been a whole new association set up in the UK just to manage the customer engagement, the marketing of it, to make sure that they are fully engaged and they like it. EU and UK standards, again, as I said, these aren't setting exact specifications for what we're installing, but frameworks and planning so that we can work around that. And yeah, we're, I think, keen to develop more trade links with India, and I've certainly learned a lot from some of the companies I've met this week. I think there's some things like data analytics. I think we could learn quite a lot from what you're doing over here, because that's going to be quite a challenge going forward. But I'll stop there. Thank you very much. If you want more information, I have lots of packs left, and this contains a lot more detail about the smart metering program in the UK.
Thank you very much, Ms. Palmer.